Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. Wow, so this episode kind of became a research fest more than a quick news rundown. I planned to cover more topics, but I think it's worth it because these are important, potentially monumental topics, and the details matter. So let's get gritty. The Washington Post has released what they say is an advanced copy of Biden's child tax credit revision. It's what we expected, raises the credit amount to $3,600 per child under 6 and $3,000 per child 6 to 17. What surprised me was the means testing. According to the article, Biden's plan would start to phase out at just $75,000 for single filers, much lower than the $200,000 quoted in the current tax code and in Romney's plan. But also, according to the article, it would not change the threshold from the current credits, which is $200,000, so I don't really know. We'll have to see when it actually comes out. Biden's plan is estimated to cut child poverty in half, where Romney's would cut it by a third. To clarify the earned income tax credit change in Romney's plan, it would approximately double the benefit for single filers without children to $1,000, while lowering it for singles with kids by anywhere from $2,600 to $5,700, depending on the number of children. But married filers get $2,000 under Romney's plan, where they currently get the same as single filers, or $1,000. So that means a gain of $1,500 for child-free married filers, and brings the potential loss for married filers with kids down to between $1,600 and $4,700. That's a lot of numbers to listen to. Basically, Romney's plan is actually more generous than Biden's for child-free Americans, but worse for families with kids, as far as the earned income tax credit goes. Another important detail that I missed before is that Romney's proposal is actually significantly less conditional than Biden's, insofar as it does not means test on the front end. It sends the checks out to all families and taxes back from those over $200,000 in income, just like logic and human decency mandate. This is pretty huge and arguably makes Romney's plan a bigger step toward UBI than Biden's, although I do believe Romney's is more restrictive on immigrant families. This is essentially a proper UBI for kids, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you how big a deal that is for the movement. Either of these plans would be massive progress forward, but Romney's is pretty much all the way. The real kicker here is that Romney's plan being deficit neutral means that it can be enacted permanently through reconciliation, where Biden's, which increases the deficit, can only pass temporarily. Biden's would need to pass outside of reconciliation to become permanent, meaning either getting rid of the filibuster or getting 10 or more Republican votes. In the current GOP, the latter is not happening, and the GOP, Joe Manchin, Sinema, and other Democrats bar the former. Thus, I would say Biden's plan is more generous in the short term as far as benefits, but Romney's wins in the long term. Democrats should adopt Romney's amendment. They can always try to put through a more generous plan later, but now is the time to secure a permanent, universal improvement. Either way, we should continue to convert conditional welfare programs to unconditional cash. The tax credit thread has been updated with all of this information. On that note, a new poll from Data for Progress finds that 62% of 1,100 polled want Congress to send checks as soon as possible, while just half as many are more concerned about targeting the checks. So not only is targeting empirically bad policy, it is also very unpopular. Yet, Congress is still doing it because the GOP and a few Democratic representatives think they know what is best, which they do not. Again, this lack of representation does not promote favor for Democratic government and is a clear call for reforms. The poll also shows who we need to work on. Just 17% of Democrats were concerned about means testing, compared to 50% of Republicans. The more contagious British variant of COVID, known as B117, is currently estimated to be about 2% of U.S. infections, but spreading rapidly. According to a new study, it is doubling roughly every 10 days. From analysis of 500,000 tests and hundreds of genomes, the researchers estimate this variant to be about 30 to 40% more contagious and predict it will be dominant within a month. A new study claims B117 may also be 35% more deadly, though that study has yet to be properly vetted. Current vaccines appear to be highly effective against this strain and all others aside from one, that being B1351 from South Africa. Booster shots are currently being developed to shore up the vaccine against this variant. Preventing infection also slows the rate of mutations of the virus, which is why acceptance of the vaccines will likely determine whether or not COVID can be eradicated or becomes a permanent seasonal illness requiring regular vaccination like with the flu. I cannot emphasize enough that the difference between those two outcomes is an incalculable number more deaths. Please do whatever you can to end this pandemic, or it may never end. We are still averaging 3,000 American deaths per day. Speaking of Trump's GOP, they've apparently now decided to try and shift the blame for the Capitol attack onto Pelosi. Yes, you heard that right. Both Senators Meadows and Johnson went on Fox News to talk about how they think Nancy Pelosi somehow orchestrated the piss-poor response from the Capitol Police in what sounds eerily similar to the false flag conspiracy theories that just helped get Green kicked off of committee roles. I guess they just wanted to make sure that we know they've learned nothing and there is no bottom. Finally, fellow Yangganger Joshua, who you may know from his YouTube show Paradigm Shift, or his appearances on the Moving Forward podcast, announced yesterday that he has snagged an interview with Marianne Williamson. He's taking suggestions for questions to ask in the thread below, and this is a big deal. Congrats to Josh. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. Bookmark and share the thread on Romney's plan, the COVID thread, and the means testing poll. Tell Biden and Congress that Romney's amendment is the way forward. Flood Congress with calls, tweets, faxes, and letters using the ResistBot or Income Movement Easy Contacts below. If you need help, consult Humanity Forward, the Income Movement Aid Database, the Mission Asset Fund, or United Way, and don't forget to Yang Daily.